Thank you, Dory. Before we get started on that, I do want to take this opportunity to show everyone our brand new website. I am so excited about this. It's beautiful and pretty and easy to navigate, and I'll just show you very quickly the banner that flashes across there with the different pictures. And just click on the tabs at the top. You can preview software. Redeeming your purchases is where you go to download designs. You can download software there. The webinars are all right here for you. There's videos, there's free projects, more about the design collections and where you redeem those. And dealer locator. So if you are looking for the software or any of the we're going to talk about a particular design collection tonight. You can just click on the dealer locator and go right there, put your zip code in, and find a dealer near you. Eileen's blog is also on here, and I will warn you, ladies, it's a little bit like, and gentlemen, it's a little bit like Pinterest. Once you start on that, you just keep going and going and going because there's so many interesting blogs out there. The Software Saturday blog, or Saturday Software blog, is always about one of the inspiration softwares, and when there's new updates coming out, it will be on there. And then of course click here for support, and you can always get to Dory and the help desk and get all of your questions answered. I'll scroll down a little bit so you can see one of the things that is really cool is where you can find inspiration socials near you, whether it's a hooping clinic or a embroidery and quilting event. You can find them right here just by clicking on the socials and find one near you. So with that being said, let's get started, and I want to switch out of this. We'll minimize it, and I'm going to go first to my block piecer, or I'm sorry, to my quilt embellisher. Okay, so now one of the things that we have talked about in the past is applique, and we're going to talk about that a little bit again today, but our focus today is on artwork and how to get artwork from your software to a cutter. And the cutters that we will refer to predominantly today will be the silhouette, cameo silhouette, and the Brother Skin and Cut, and a little bit on the Cricut. The Cricut works pretty much the same way as the silhouette does in that it uses the same format, which is SVG. So let's get started by creating a new design. Now, where do you find artwork in your designs? Well, sometimes you have to make it, and sometimes it's already there. Let me show you an example. Let me go down to my bottom right-hand corner and click on my design library, and I'm going to scroll down to event design sets. Those of you who have been to one of our events know that we give out designs when you sign up online, and one of them, if you've been to an embroidery and quilting mixer, is this blanket stitch applique set, which has all 10 numbers and all of your letters included in it. So we'll just pick a letter there, and we'll pick the K since Catherine's with us tonight. And when that comes up, I want to show you a couple of things. If we look at the sequence view, now you see I'm still in the library. If I go down to the very bottom and click on sequence, it shows me what is in this design. There are two colors, colors 9 and 10. Now, let me show you how to reduce that real quick. If you come right below the box there to where it says remove extra, click on the minus sign. And now you'll see over in the left-hand corner that it's just two colors. Sometimes if we're working with a lot of designs, every time we open up a design, it loads the colors of that design, and we end up with all these different colors that we're not even using. So to scale it down to the designs that are, or the colors that are in the design, just remove the extra when you're on the design page. Now we have colors 1 and 2 instead of 9 and 10, and if we right click here and say expand all, it will show us what those colors are made of. This one is artwork, and the second color, number 2 here, is applique. So if I turn off my applique, you can see that this design set comes with artwork. So it's already in there for you. You don't have to create it on your own. And a lot of times now, digitizers are starting to put in artwork files like an SVG or an Adobe Illustrator file or an FCM file in with their designs. So in this case, where it's an applique, we have an outline of exactly what that applique is supposed to look like. So you could actually take this and export it, put it on your cutter, and cut that fabric out exactly in that shape. Now, before we go any further, I do want to have a little bit of discussion on why you might want to do that. With appliques especially, and dealing with one color, it's not really so, or one fabric, it's not so bad. I learned my lesson a while back when I was doing an applique that had 12 different fabrics on it. I got to fabric number 11 and I laid it down like we typically do, let it over the placement stitch, let it stitch the tack down, removed my hoop from the machine, and went to trim that fabric and popped the fabric out of the hoop. Let me tell you, I was not a happy camper because I had one fabric left to go, and that block had taken me over an hour to get that far. So I have decided from now on, anytime I do applique, I'm cutting it before I lay it down. Now, there's lots of different options out there, whether you use it with a type of backing material on it, like steam-a-seam or some of them. Almost all of the stabilizer manufacturers make an applique product that you can fuse onto the back of the fabric, and then you can cut out your fabric, and it will depend on your cutting machine, whether you cut it, what the settings are, and how to get that cleanly cut, which we are not going to go into specifically tonight. Just know that there are lots of different options, and I encourage you to experiment with them and look on the internet and see what other people have done and what they've had success with. Okay, so here would be my art file, my outline for that particular letter. At this point, I can do a couple of things. I can take, and if I want to, I could just print that. I'll go into print preview. And when I do that, I'm going to change my system because I don't want the header. I don't need color analysis, no crosshairs. I do want actual size. I don't even want stitches on there or a footer. Now let's see what that looks like. There's my artwork. If I want to print that out on an applique product, I could do that, fuse it to the back of the applique, and then cut it out with scissors. However, in this particular case, excuse me, in this particular case, because this letter is not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the same on both sides. We would need to reverse it. So let's go back to our close out of here, come back over here, select it, then come up to our tools and click on Flip Horizontal. We want to create a mirror image. Because this is going to go on the back of the letter, when we turn it over, we want the K to be going the right direction, okay? So unless you're doing letters that, like an A or a T, depending on the T, then you're going to want to flip that if you're going to print it, fuse it, and cut it, okay? Also, if you're going to, but not if you're going to put it on your cutting machine. As long as the product is on the bottom of the fabric, you're okay, because you would cut it out right in the right direction, right side up, to where it looks like you're going to read it, because you're looking at the fabric, okay? All right, I hope that wasn't too confusing. Now, to go to a cutter, what we would do at this point, and we could have it selected just by itself, or we could bring up the whole design. It doesn't matter, and we don't have to have anything selected. I would come up to my File option at the top left-hand corner, click File, and Export Artwork. At this point, it brings up my dialog box, and I could type in K and then select the file type that I want it to be. Now, SVG is what we use with the silhouette, Cameo silhouette, and it's also what is used with the Cricut and possibly some other ones that I'm not familiar with. Adobe Illustrator is a graphics program, and it's, you know, likely that somebody you know might need that for some reason, or if you're going to have something else cut or sent to a professional shop, you may need that. PLT is a plotter file. AutoCAD is DXF. That is for mostly commercial cutters that cut vinyl and different things, and they're larger, but I'm thinking a larger cutter might be really cool. Something that goes over 12 inches. And then finally, the Brother Scan and Cut, which is the format FCM. And when you click on any of these, it will save it in that format. And I could actually take this and select where to save it. For instance, if I had a stick on here, I could save it directly to that stick or to that card, and then put that card in my cutter and let it read it. Okay? That simple. So get it in the format that you need it for your project. Now, let's look at another one. This, by the way, is the alphabet. Did I mention that you get if you go to one of the embroidery and quilting mixers right now? I'll give y'all a sneak preview of a new one that's coming out. And I'm going to go back to my library and click on Block Applique. Now, here's another set of designs that are going to be offered in the near future to come to an event. And this one's a little bit different. Let's look at what makes up this block. We'll switch back to our sequence view and expand each one of the colors, or I could right-click and say Expand All. And we have three different things here. Let's turn off the colors by clicking the eyeball. The first thing on here is our artwork. Now, I can export this artwork and send it to my cutter. I could cut out that backdrop and then add my applique on the top of it. Let's look at it in 3D. And you could have an applique that looks like that. Also included with this is a complex fill that shows you that you can use for an embossed towel, in which case you probably wouldn't use your artwork. But the artwork is in there, and again, we can do the same thing as we did before. With the design on the screen, all I have to do is go to File, Export Artwork, and I can save that be in a format for, in this case, my silhouette, and click Save. And then I can open that up in my software, and the only thing that I will see will be my artwork. It doesn't export the stitches, it's just the artwork. Okay? Let's look at another example. Open a new file. How about with a regular applique? Let's open a new file. And this time, I'm going to create some artwork from a backdrop. So I'm going to select my backdrop tool over on the left-hand side and bring up all of these pictures that I have stored in my backdrop. And I can select anything I want. In fact, let's do these leaves here. Okay? And I'm going to click on that. It's a backdrop file. It's probably a JPEG, which all of our backdrop files are just they're not vector artwork. They would be a JPEG, you know, simple artwork, which is what we normally get. And I'm going to open that. And now you see, because my grid is on the screen, and you see the grid on top of here, this is an artwork that I can pick up and move. It's just a drawing in the background, okay, which is why it's called a backdrop. Now, the first thing I would want to do is come to my properties and resize it if I need to, and that is over here in the upper right-hand corner. But 8x8 works fine for me. Now, to make artwork out of this so that we can save it and cut it, we'll create it. I'm going to come up to the top on the first row and select my artwork tool, click on the arrow next to it, and it really doesn't matter what I select here. I could do the pen, the rectangle, any of them, because I'm going to use the shape that's on the screen. So I'm just going to select artwork, and then I could come in and draw that, but that is not something that I think is really fun. Now, if you have a very pixelated picture, absolutely do that, and you can place your lines and create your artwork that way. But I prefer to do it the easy way with the magic wand. So I'm going to come back up here to the top with my artwork tool selected, select my magic wand. Now, in my properties box over here on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that fill is not checked. It doesn't have to be, but for our purposes, and so you can actually see what I'm doing, I am going to turn the fill on. So instead of doing just an outline around it, it will fill that with color, because the outlines are sometimes hard to see. So if you know you've done everything right, and you've, here I'll show you, and you have clicked on that, but you don't see it, turn off your backdrop over here and see how that's not filled, so it's difficult to see. If you fill it by clicking on selecting it and clicking fill, then you'll be able to see it. Let's turn our backdrop back on. But I prefer to have it be filled from the start. So I select it again, and I click fill before I ever start creating my leaves. Then at this point, I'm going to come down to the bottom right-hand corner, change my color, and let's select a light purple there, like those other leaves are. I'll select larkspur. That sounds like a nice color. And now all I have to do is click on that color, and it will draw it for me. Whoops. And the reason it didn't make it larkspur is because I didn't actually pick up that color. I had to right-click on it, and now it's larkspur. Click back. Yes, I do that all the time. On our design or our artwork, I'm coming down to the bottom and right-clicking to pick up that color. Now, when I click on these leaves, it will create them and fill them at the same time. Just like that. And if we dismiss the backdrop, we can see exactly what's happened there. And turn it back on. Now, at this point, I have artwork. Do a couple of things with it. Once I do the whole design and create all the artwork that I want to have cut, then I could save it, or I could export it in the format that I need by coming, again, back up to File and Export Artwork, giving it a name, and selecting a format, okay? Or I could copy it and leave it there. If you're going to send a design to someone and you don't want to send multiple designs, or you want to save it for future reference and not have to match them up, one thing that I typically do when I'm adding artwork to design is once I'm finished, I will select everything or do a Control-A and right-click, copy, right-click, paste. And now if you look over here to the side, I've doubled the number of artwork elements that I have, okay? And then I will just select the top ones. And if I want to make those applique, I'll come up to my applique convert tool, click on it, and now those are all applique. Let's look at it in 3D. And I still have my art, oops, I selected them all. Hang on, undo. Okay, let's just select the last two and click on our artwork or our applique convert. Now we have our applique with the artwork behind it. So you can see, let's expand all of them. Expand all. And you can see I've got both elements in the design. At this point, I could export the artwork as well. I can also select the artwork and come up here to my fabric options, select a fabric that I like. Not those. Let's see, how about this one? And click OK, and it will fill the fabric in for me. So if you prefer to save your designs like that with the fabric that you used in them, you could certainly do that. So that is creating artwork from a backdrop. Joy, do we have any questions so far?
We do.
Before I go on?
Yes, I do. I do have a question from our buddy Nancy. She wants to know, do you have to pre-treat your fabric before using a cutter?
Oh, you know what I do? I've kind of gotten away from washing fabric because I use a lot of pre-cuts now. I just find that I can get more variety for less money. So I don't want to wash those and then fray and then lose that part of the fabric. And if you buy quality fabric, you're not as likely for it to run. So what I do before I cut it is I starch it like crazy. One of the things with the cutters that is universal is you need to have it act like paper. There's another product out there called Material Magic that you can purchase at quality stores that will allow you to make it really, really stiff like paper. From what I understand, it's what the silk flower industry uses to make silk flowers. It will wash out when you're ready for it to wash, but if you're sticking fabric down to a sticky mat and you can get it very smooth, if it isn't treated with starch or something to make it stiff, then it can snag on the blade. It's more prone to. Plus, when you pull it up off of there, if you've got fine lines, fine areas in there, like if I was going to do this stem here, that would be likely to ravel and stretch, but not if you have it starched really well or with Material Magic.
Super. Okay.
I make mine almost like paper. Plus, then, if you're piecing in the hoop, it folds very nicely.
All right. And can you change the stitch that goes around in your applique area?
Can I change this stitch? Oh, absolutely. Yes, and we do cover that in all of our applique, in the applique class that we did. But
Okay.
I will show you really quick. I can just select it, and if I want to make that a blanket stitch, then I'm going to change my inset to about 95. I can change all of my parameters, but that's the most important one here, and switch it just like that.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. All right. Moving on then, let's talk about designs that we already have that maybe we want to change in some way or another and make into an applique using fabric. I love applique. Fabric just, well, it's an excuse to buy more fabric, but I love the fact that it, it's an excuse to buy more fabric, which is always nice, but it gives me so much pop with very little effort. I don't have to change spools of thread constantly and all of that. one of my favorite designs, and this one is actually an applique, but it's raw edge applique, is the Stipple Baby. And I'm going to go down to my stipple right here, Stipple Baby. And I don't know if you all have ever seen that. You should definitely check it out. Find a local dealer. You can go on the Inspired by Dime website and find a dealer near you. And if they don't have it, they can certainly order it for you. So let's pick, let's just do the onesie here. And I'm going to pull that in. And let's see what makes up this design. First, let me get rid of my grid because it's disturbing my view. And I'm going to look at my sequence view, expand it by right-clicking and saying expand. And I have 2 run stitches. I don't have any artwork here because the way the stipple programs or the stipple design sets are designed to work is that you lay down a piece of fabric after it does the placement stitch, which would be this one. Let's ungroup it first since I pulled it in from the library. It comes in grouped. If I turn the second one off, it's going to stitch this running stitch. Then I would lay down the fabric, and then it would stitch the next stitch over the top of it, which is also a running stitch, the green one. Now, what I want to do, though, is make this a regular applique. Either, with any kind of stitch I want on the edge, but I just don't want raw edge, and I want to cut this out ahead of time. I always, when I cut my fabrics out also, I do not make them larger than my applique, okay? I use the placement line is always the original artwork line. That's the placement line. So in this case, they're actually one on top of the other, but I'm going to select just this placement line, and I can copy and paste it, or I could just click at this point up here on my Convert to Artwork tool, click, and it converts it to artwork for me. Now, I can take the run stitch that would go perfectly around the top of it, and with this one, if I was going to do raw edge applique and cut it out ahead of time, I would make that a little bit larger, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But in this case, I want it to be the same size as the placement line, and I'm going to take and select the run stitch and convert that up here to applique. And then I can make it whatever type of applique I want. If I want to make it a motif stitch and select one of those, do something, let's do this. It'll look like it's in rickrack. And apply it, well, not so much rickrack as static. Let's change the pattern length on that from 6 to I'll make it half as big. Let me try a 3, since I really don't know how big a millimeter is. And I could even make that smaller if I wanted to, or try a different stitch altogether. We could do little circles and see what those look like. Well, I kind of like that better. Maybe even smaller. We'll make it a 2 millimeter and apply. Okay, so you can certainly do something like that and convert that to applique. So very easy, from a raw edge applique or a line drawing, you can turn it into a regular applique or create artwork to put fabric behind it. Now, before we move on, I do want to talk a little bit about why what you do when you're cutting your appliques that close. You want to do a couple of things. If you're not putting them, or one of a couple of things, you need to get your exact placement, because we're not taking the hoop off and trimming around our applique before we do the finishing stitch. If you're doing it this way, then you'll want to either have an applique product like Steam Seam 2 or any of those that the stabilizer companies make, all the quilting product notions companies make, different applique products. Just find the ones that you like the best. Some of them are fusible, some of them are sticky, some of them are a combination of the two. If you prefer not to use those, your other options would be, once you've cut out this onesie, I could spray the back of it with a temporary spray adhesive. Pick one that won't gum up your machine. You don't want to go to the craft store to get that unless you know specifically what you're looking for. You want to get some that's designed to be used for sewing so that your needle doesn't get all gummy from it. So you could do that if you don't mind using spray. And I actually have a turkey pans that I got on sale after Christmas, and I do that sometimes when I'm spraying, and then I can put it right in position and stick it down. Another option is a glue stick. If I'm desperate and don't have a fabric glue stick handy, then I'll just do it like in the center where I'm not going to stitch through it. I don't want to risk that paste, which is really what it is, getting down into my bobbin case. But that's another way to get it stuck down. If you have a fusible on the back, you can always take a craft iron. Don't take your hoop off the machine, because that's one of the ways that you can mess it up. Leave your hoop on there, take a little craft iron right there on your machine, and get it to where it just sticks good enough that it can stitch around it. And then do your finishing stitch. The other thing where you can run an applique, aside from taking the hoop off and popping the fabric out, is trimming it with your scissors. You're liable to loosen the fabric that's in the hoop, and then your finishing stitches are maybe not exactly where they're supposed to be, or you could cut through something you don't want to cut through. And I had a tendency never to get quite close enough, so I had some raw edges sticking out. So I really like cutting them ahead of time. Okay, now, any other questions on that in my Quilt Embellisher and creating artwork?
Nope.
If not,
That's
okay.
Nope, they don't. We do have one quick question. Have you got time
Okay,
for
sure.
a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What if you want to make it a raw edge, according to our friend Christy?
Uh-huh.
She wants to know, what if you want to make it a raw edge?
Okay.
Can you do that?
Perfect timing, Christy. Yes, you can. And let me show you how you would do that. Excuse my email. Let's go ahead and save this, and I'm going to save this design. We'll save it as, and I'm going to put it in my stipple folder so I can find it, and we'll call it onesie applique. Okay, and I'm saving it as a C2S file, because all of my programs will read C2S, and they know that that's artwork, and those are what stitch that is, and everything else. Now, let's open up my block piecer. Now, my block piecer does things a little differently. It will not create an applique for me, but I can open up any file, and I'm going to go to my library, and I'm going to scroll down to, I'm on the bottom right-hand corner, to stipple, S-T-I. Oh, and it's added in there already for me. Sometimes, if you're in the same program, I've had this happen to me before. That's how I know. If I was in the same program, if I was still in Quilt Embellisher, and I went to pull this file up, it might not show it to me. I would have to right-click and say refresh to see it, because it's already loaded that into memory or something. Anyway, I'm going to pull this design in, and you see, even though you don't see the artwork here, the artwork is still with it. Now, what I'm going to do at this point, let's look at our sequence view, and I'm going to select my artwork, and I want just the artwork, so let's ungroup it. I'm going to select this artwork, okay, I could do that here, I can do that there. Then I'm coming up here in the top left-hand corner and going to my cutting tool. And I click on my cutter, and it brings up my dialog box. Now, you'll see here a couple of things we want to do. First, there's our design, our artwork, and I want to select the mat that I want to use. So this time, let's use the Brother Scan and Cut. And for this one, I could use the 6x6 mat because that's small enough. But if we're doing more than one of these out of the same fabric, then I probably want to make that bigger. Let's do the 12 by 12. And I want to do 4 of these. So down here in the bottom section are all of my parameters. And I'm going to change my repeats on this to 4. I want to do this 4 times. And click Apply. So now it puts 4 of them up there for me. The other thing that it's done, if you notice right here, it's added a seam allowance. Now, I can come over here, and if I don't want 1/4 of an inch outside of the placement line, which is where it's going to do my decorative stitch around it, then I'm going to change that. And perhaps, 1/8 of an inch would be good. So we'll do 0.125. I think that's right. And apply that. So now I have a much smaller edge around it. If you size things up, like, 2% or whatever, you don't always get the perfect outline, okay? So I like adding a seam allowance or a stitching allowance, if you will, a raw edge allowance in here. And then I can save this. Once I've got it exactly the way I want it, click Save and select, we'll call it onesie, okay, and select our type. Now here, instead of exporting, we can actually save it as an FCM or an SVG or a DXF or a PLT. So the plotter, your CAD files, the SVG that you use for the scan, the silhouette and the Cricut, or the Brother Scan and Cut. And I could save it directly to a stick if I want to at this point. But what happens when I save it is it's going to save a couple of things for me. One, here's my FCM file, and it does this because of what the program is designed to do. It also gives me a preview file, which I can just ignore because it's just showing me my design. So I would just save that to my stick and get rid of my preview because I don't need it. And that's how you would do a raw edge applique. Does that answer your question, Dory? I think it does.
Yes,
so
it does. Yes, it does.
Okay.
Can you also answer
Okay,
from my little buddy, Christy? She wants to know, do you increase the size when you...
I add a seam allowance. I don't...
You do.
Huh? Go ahead.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
I like to do it with the seam allowance because it's perfect. If I was... Let's turn that off, and we'll just test it. If I was to take this and let's save this one, and so I'm going to copy it and paste it, and let's make it larger. And when we increase the size, how big do we make it? Let's do it by a percentage, and hopefully that'll be right, because I don't know if I add, 0.1, okay, let's add 1.3 under that, so that would be 6. Oh, and I'd have to, it's maintaining aspect ratio. Let's see what happens. Apply. Now, let's change the color on it and send it to the back so we can see exactly what happened. Yeah, it's not perfect, you know. See how that's why I like doing the seam allowance method. I'm a little off. Even if I line these up horizontally and vertically, I'm still off a little, okay? So that's why I don't like to do it that way. Maybe if you do it a percentage, it would be different. Let's, well, but you get the idea. The seam allowance is always perfect. The other thing you can do, and let me flip back over real quick to my quilt embellisher. The other thing that just dawned on me you could do is take this, right-click, because if you don't have Block Piecer, it's a really cool program and you really should have it. But if you don't, here's what you can do. Create an outline, okay? And you can make that outline 0.125 on the outside. Click OK. Then that is already, as you can see over here in our, oops, I turned it off, in our sequence view, that's already artwork. So I could choose to use that as my cut file instead of the purple one. So that's another option, and you get a better outline with it because it's consistent all the way around. Whoop, I didn't know. I hadn't thought of that until just now. Okay, good question, Christy. All right, let's go back to my Block Piecer now. Oops. And talk about, oh, I'm in Block Piecer. Oh. I didn't know Block Piecer did outlines. Okay, so we're all good. Let's do another, and Quilt Embellisher does as well, so you can use it in either program. Now, let's talk about piecing blocks, which is what we normally do in Block Piecer. So we pull in blocks and we cut them out and piece them together. Now, I'm not going to go through the assembly part of Block Piecer today because we've gone over that in previous webinars. And actually, for anybody who is new to these programs, if you go back to the beginning webinars and watch, it really takes you through step by step on these two programs that may be less familiar to you or if you're new to them. So let's select a design, and we've got, you know, 1,263 blocks in here. But let's do this triangle log cabin. That looks kind of fun. And we'll pick a size for it. Let's make it 6 by 6, or I could put a custom size on. But let's just get our artwork up here on the screen. Now, this comes in as artwork. So each of these little patches is its own design. And you can see over here on the right-hand corner in the sequence view, if we expand that, each patch is a separate piece of artwork. Now, if I want to cut these out, I would select them all by either dragging a box around it or doing Control-A, then select my cutter tool and select my mat. So in here we have the Brother Scan and Cut, and we also have the silhouette. You can also make up your own hoops, all right? Let's cancel out of that, close for a minute, and let me show you where you do that, because chances are they're going to come out with a new mat size. All you have to do is come over here on the right-hand side, click on your hoop, and let's say that one of the companies comes out with a giant mat, and it's going to be, let's call it new, it's going to be 24 inches by, I'm fantasizing here, 48 inches. And we're going to call it Giant Mat. Giant Mat. And click OK. Now I have a giant mat. And I could use that in any of my programs. All of the hoops get added in the same place. So if you have Block Piecer and Quilt Embellisher and Pet and Word Art and Stitches, you'll be able to pull that mat up in any of them. So now, wow, that's an awesome mat. Let's go to our cutter, and we've picked our giant mat, and let's say we want to do 37 repeats of this design. We'll type that in right here, and I use the defaults on my cutter because if I am piecing, I always want to use a seam allowance of 0.25 inches. There may be times when you want to do something different, like with the appliques, whether it be a raw edge applique or if you want to do needle turn applique, and rather than drawing, tracing out all those things and cutting them by hand, you can load in the artwork, bring it into your cutter, change your seam allowance to 0.125 for 1/8 of an inch, cut them out by machine, and then sew them on by hand, if you do that sort of thing. The margin right here at the bottom is the space from the edge. Now back here, the white space represents our mat or our hoop, and if I need to come in a 1/2 of an inch, I can change that and click apply. And you'll see two things. Number one, it's going to give us 37 repeats of this. I hope. I've never done that many before. It'll take it a minute. In the meantime, do we have any questions, Dory? Oh, there we go. 37 repeats. And it will take us three passes with our giant mat to do that. But it's pulled it in a 1/2 an inch from the edge. Let's take that repeats back down to something reasonable before we apply other changes here. Okay, so now with one pass of the mat, I can get 12 repeats out of that. So margin is from the edge. Spacing is between each cut. How much spacing do you want? So if you can get by with 1/8 of an inch, we'll put in 1.25 and click apply. Okay, so there it puts it together. You don't use up quite as much space or fabric as you would ordinarily. Woo! And those are so small that the numbers here don't even show up, but they will cut just fine. It's just the numbers on them that are showing have to be a certain size. So, and then we would just click save and save it in the format that that giant mat requires. And that's the basic cutting. Questions on that, Dory?
Well, is there a limit? This is according to our little buddy, Ashley. Is there a
Yes.
limit on how many designs you can actually have on a mat?
Well, the space would be your limitation.
That would be it?
It will put them on, yes. Let's go back to a reasonable mat here. Let's go back to, not my fantasy mat. We'll go to the 12 by 24 inch silhouette. And here I have 12 repeats. Where it says frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, it will save that as 4 different files, okay?
Yes.
It doesn't at this time, I'll be perfectly honest, always make the best use of the space. When you open this up in your software for your silhouette or your Cricut or I think it's called Canvas for the scan and cut, the online software, you can move those around any way you want to so that you are more efficient. This just gives you a good start and adds that measurement on for you. And you know by looking at this what, this is 8 versus 9, if that makes a difference. I think 2 and 3 actually are the same. It doesn't, you would have to go back to your guide to see what those are. But if you print out your guide, then you can just hold them up and you'll know which ones are which because it'll print it out in actual size. Okay.
Okay. And does the margin only relate to the outside area, or is it also between each piece?
Good question. The margin is like okay, it's, if you look at it like you do lettering, the margin is around the outside, okay? So if you come in, you know, a 1/2 inch or 3/4, whatever you want your paper margin to be, if you're thinking in those terms, then the spacing down here, that would be your kerning, or the space between each letter and word, okay? So
Okay.
two different things. This one, margin, controls the outside, and spacing controls how close together they are. If you wanted to put in a space of 0, which I don't think is recommended, but if you were cutting them out yourself, you could certainly do that, because, you know, if you're printing this and putting it down and cutting them out, who needs a space between it if you're using scissors? Okay.
Okie
I don't know
dokie.
that that's a good idea on a mat. I haven't done that.
Okay. All
But
right.
each machine has its own recommendations.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So let me show you another way. This block came from our block library. But if you want to, let's make a new file here, make your own or import artwork, and we can make our own with the backdrop tool, just like we did before, only instead of creating appliques from it, we can create blocks. So I could pull up this particular block here, or any block I have a picture of, click on my artwork tool at the top, select my magic, click on my artwork tool, select my magic wand, or I could draw squares there if I want to. I always like to fill it just so you can see it, and then I would just start clicking, okay? And then that would create your artwork. Change colors and click again. Now, another way to do it where you don't have to go through this step, if you have artwork that's been created in another program or even saved. Now, you can save the C2S file, and like I showed you with the onesie, you can bring that up. But if you had created artwork, say, in Adobe Illustrator, or there's lots of different programs out there, EQ7, you can oftentimes save or export artwork from those programs, and that's exactly what I've done. What I've done with what I'm about to show you, I exported it from EQ7, then I come in here and say import artwork, and now you see what comes up in my images, and they're all in the same file, but now these are Windows Meta files or Adobe Illustrator. You have all of these different formats that you could pull in. I could pull in SVG files, or I could, and then save it as an FCM if I want to. So that's one way to get over that hurdle if that's an issue for you without having to go online. This case, I have, what's Big Hunter Star. Okay, so here's one that I exported from EQ7. I want to show you this in particular because before you try and cut this, the first thing you need to do is check the size. Now, come over here in the top right-hand corner to transform, click on it, and this block is actually a bedspread. It's like 72 by 72 inches. So that that is huge. We don't have a cutter that's going to cut that for us. And when you export artwork, sometimes the dimensions change. So you always want to go into your transform, which is programmer language for resize, and change the size to exactly what you want it to be. If you want this to be a 7.5-inch block, click apply, and there you go. Now let's right-click on our ruler, click center origin, and that brings it back up onto the screen for us. And now it's 7.5 inches, which is reasonable. All of this is just like the blocks that we pull in from our block library. Okay, it's separate pieces of artwork, and they're ready to go. I don't have to create the artwork. It's already made for me. I can certainly recolor it. I could apply fabrics to it, all of that sort of thing. And in fact, let me do that just on one part here so you can see how that looks when we go to the cutter. Let's pick a fabric for that. And I like that one. We'll just apply it. Okay. Now, when I select the entire block and go to my cutter, then it has each one of those colors in a separate frame. Now, this is different than in Quilt Embellisher. When you export artwork in Quilt Embellisher to FCM or SVG or what have you, it doesn't separate the colors. So in Block Piecer, it separates the colors and it applies a seam allowance that you can change. You can also change the number of repeats. So it really, really works great with the cutters, even if you plan on never doing any piecing in the hoop, which it does really great. But if you only want to do chain piecing, or foundation piecing, and just want the ability to add seam allowances and cut them out with your cutter, it's a pretty awesome program. And of course, you can change your repeats here as well. So if we're doing 2 of these, we can click Apply and then save that in the format that we need for our cutter. Now, one other thing I want to show you very quickly before we wrap up here. Here's another block I'm actually working on stitching out right now. It's called New York Beauty. I was up in New York a couple of weeks ago at Grandmother's Thimble and Vestal, and we had such a good time. I'm going to bring up this block. Now, this typically isn't a block that I can create. Well, I certainly can't do the whole thing in the hoop because it's got curved piecing, okay, both on the green piece here and the purple piece there. But what I can do is piece all of these in the hoop, both the small rays coming out and the larger ones, and select just those and piece them in the hoop. But what I want to do is select the green. Oops, let's ungroup it. It always comes, not change colors. So I connected them, sorry, or combined them. It always comes in grouped from when you pull it in from the library. What I want to do, these, I've already made these actually, and I just had 2.5-inch strips that I used and laid them down and then trimmed them because that was so easy in the hoop. I didn't need to even take the hoop off to trim those because it's just one straight line. So that was easy. But the curved patches, this green and this purple, I'm going to cut with my cutting machine because it will do them with precision. I won't have to worry about, did I skew that? If I have to make a copy of that on the copier and lay it down and trace around it, add a 1/4 inch, I don't have to worry about any of that. It makes it very, very simple. And if I need to change my repeats down here at the bottom, and I'm doing actually 4 of these and putting them together, I'll click 4 and apply. So with my 12 by 24-inch mat, I've got to run it through twice. And with my purple squares there, I can do that actually. I could use the smaller hoop and use less fabric. But I will cut all of those out with the seam allowance. Then it's going to make it really easy to put that whole block together. So I don't have to cut the whole thing. I can pick and choose. I can change my seam allowances. I can multiply my pieces and so on. Any questions?
Nope, that's it. You have people just blown away. This is like so interesting for those of us that have the scanning machines. Up until now, I haven't really used mine.
Oh, you are going to now, I bet.
You betcha.
And for those of you who are making out your Christmas list, You sure add one to it because they are so fun, and they really, here's the other thing about it. It really saves time. I haven't measured anything. I pull these in. I add a seam allowance. I don't have to measure. I don't have to be precise. I don't have to measure twice, cut once. I just tell it, and it'll cut it exactly the way it's supposed to be.
That is so exciting. Thank you very much, and thank you for showing us how easy the scan and cut tools can help our quilting.
You're welcome, and y'all have a good evening. Thank you, Dory, and thank
Thank
you,
you.
Catherine and Ashley.